Here are the 7 best, cheapest, and easiest countries in Europe Americans can easily escape to or move to, whatever you want to call it, doesn't particularly matter. The first one is actually, let me give you a couple disclaimers before we get deeper into this video. So first disclaimer is there has to be a pathway to staying long term, because that is obviously something you need to be aware of. Pretty much all of these places are going to be extremely safe. Most of them are going to be extremely affordable as well, and all of them are going to have decent healthcare for the most part. Now, the one exception is the first country that I wanted to talk about. The final disclaimer is the fact that pretty much all these places, if you're making, let's say, $3,500 to $4K per month through passive income or through a digital nomad type location independent freelancer, whatever type of income, whether it's your own business or you're doing freelance work, doesn't matter. You're going to have access to at least a year-long visa, and some of these places are actually visa free, and some of them require a lot less than $4,000 per month. But in general, that is a good baseline to keep in mind. Okay, so with all that said, the first one is Georgia, and like I said, this is probably the lowest level of safety on this list. And the reason I say that is because currently there are some interesting things happening in Georgia, mainly because of the election. Not that it's an entirely unsafe country, but I believe there were protests going on and things of that nature. So that is something to be aware of. Otherwise, Georgia is generally an Eastern European country, although it's also partially in Asia. I mean, I guess transcontinental. So if you want to count it as Europe or not, but going to be extremely low cost, extremely affordable, extremely accessible. I believe it is a year visa free for US citizens who want to work, study, live there. And you got great food, you got great wine, you got great people. And it used to be one of my favorite countries until some of the recent changes that they have underwent. Next, we are going to go with Estonia. So this is in the north of Europe, close to Finland, Sweden, that area. So geographically, it's going to be a bit colder. The days are going to be a bit shorter, depending on the time of year, obviously. But when it is, let's say, late spring to summertime, great weather, and generally is going to be a bit more affordable, but not as affordable as some of the other places on this list like Georgia. But the lower cost of living is certainly going to be less than most places in Western countries, specifically the United States. So you will be able to feel that, but it's not going to be bottom of the barrel prices. One other thing is, I've never been there during Christmas time, but I hear it has an amazing Christmas market. So maybe you want to check out the Christmas markets there. In winter, go hit up the Northern Lights in Finland and Sweden and all that stuff. But generally, it is going to be a really, really interesting place. They're doing a lot of really interesting things. They are extremely tax-friendly for Europe, which is another thing I should touch on probably at the end of this video about the tax situation regarding some of these places as well. And while we're in that area, the Baltic States area, might as well mention Latvia. The neighbor of Estonia is another really interesting place. It's going to be a bit more affordable than Estonia from what I recall and in my personal experience, although I didn't go to all the cities in both these countries. But what I do recall, Riga was a bit more affordable than Tallinn. Once again, still gonna kind of have the same issue as Estonia in the fact that since it's right there, it's gonna be a little bit more cold. You're gonna have some brutal winters, whether that's snow, rain, just low temperatures. And obviously, if you watch any of my content, you know I am not a huge fan of winter. That's why I say these places are more interesting to me in the summertime. But if you don't mind the 4 seasons, these are extremely interesting places. I will also give a special shout out to Poland, because they do have the bilateral visa agreement with the US as of now, where you can stay 90 days there and then you have to leave. You can go to a place like Ukraine or Georgia or Albania, and then come back and get another 90 days. That said, I don't know how much longer that is going to be going on for. So if that is your plan, I would check up and do your due diligence on that end. And I would also say it's a bit of a negative because if you're doing the 90-day hopping around thing, you can't enjoy any of the other places in the Schengen area. Now, if you get residency in Latvia or Estonia, for example, what you can do is you spend your time in Latvia or Estonia, and then maybe during the less desirable months, you can spend those 3 months in a place that is more desirable and has better weather, which you couldn't do in Poland because you wouldn't have residency there. How residency works, essentially, if you are in Estonia or Latvia, is you have visa-free access. You can be in those places for as long as you want, and they don't count towards your Schengen time. But when you leave to other countries, you still have to follow that 90, 180 day rule. And Poland has some of the same issues since it's in the northern part of Europe as well. And so you can't really escape those brutal winters if you plan on using the bilateral visa agreement. Although you could certainly just go to Albania or something for 90 days or something like that. And speaking of Albania, that might as well be next on the list. So Albania is going to be the first country on this list that actually has a decent climate all year round. It's also probably going to be the least developed of the places that I have mentioned as well, so it has the most growth potential. It's probably the lowest cost of living of the places I mentioned. And I went to Georgia, that was extremely low cost of living as well. But generally, I would say Albania is probably a little bit more affordable, and it has better climate, it has amazing food, doesn't have the same quality of wine as Georgia, I will admit, but both Durrës and Tirana offer a ton of value for the money you're going to spend. And I really love Durrës because if you're in some of the nicer areas, which I'm assuming you would be living in if you're making at least $4,000 per month, that's going to probably put you in the top 1% of Albanian income earners. You're going to have a safe area, it's going to be clean, and you can live right on the beach for $500 a month, and that is Airbnb prices, which we all know are inflated. And a really cool thing with Albania is 1 year visa-free access for United States citizens. Then you have to leave for 30 days, I believe it is. And so you could leave to, some of these other places that I have talked about, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, for 30, 60, 90 days, and then come right back to Albania. And the location of Albania, I would say, is superior to pretty much all these places that I have mentioned so far, because you're in pretty much right in the heart of Europe. You could go to pretty much anywhere in a relatively decent amount of time. I would say the airport probably not as well connected as an airport like the airport in Warsaw. But another thing is, if you do want to pursue something more, let's say, long-term, in Albania, I think the digital nomad visa is you need to earn $500 a month or something like that. And then you get 3 years or 4 years or something like that as a U.S. citizen if you can prove it. Another thing I should point out is generally, in order to prove your financial solvency, it's going to be about 6 months of bank statements, which I probably should have mentioned earlier in this video. But if you've been watching my content for any period of time, you know I'm extremely high on Albania, and if I were to choose a place on this list, it would be extremely high up there. It would definitely be in my top 3. Now, moving from Albania, we are going to go to one of its next door neighbors, and that is Greece. So Greece going to have a lot of the same benefits as Albania, but a little bit higher level of infrastructure, and you're going to have a little bit more public transportation kind of things, which, to each their own. I don't use public transportation because things like Uber and Didi and Grab and whatever the app is are just so affordable that it doesn't really make a difference. And Most of these places are extremely walkable. That's one of the things I love most about European cities, is just how walkable they are, if not bikeable. Although I don't bike or ride those like e-scooters. But Greece is going to have the same benefits in the fact that you can get beaches, you're going to have great food, there's great wine, extremely affordable. It's not quite as affordable as Albania, but it is shockingly affordable. It is probably in the top 3 most affordable, with Albania, Greece, and Georgia, which probably surprises a lot of people because of the level of tourism in a place like Athens, and just how popular it is. But Greece is a great place. The one drawback with Greece is the fact that there is going to be a bit of a language barrier, because English isn't that widely spoken in my experience. I should also point out, in Albania, the level of English was pretty decent. Tallinn, pretty decent. Latvia, I don't remember. And Georgia was hit or miss. Although I was in Georgia years ago, so it could have improved significantly since then, especially because they made a bunch of changes to get more foreigners. But with all that said, I can't say enough about Greece. And once again, all these places, for the most part, if you have $4,000 a month in income, whether that is active or passive income, you're probably eligible for a digital nomad visa or some sort of long-term visa. Because I would say generally that's like the entry level point for pretty much any place in Europe. Next, we are going to go to another place, which is Italy. Italy is probably the place that, if I had to choose one, would be the number one place I would go, even over Albania. And that's simply because the food is amazing. I love both the north and the south of the country, and the north and the south are radically, radically different. Tons of important history going on there, and I just love the Italian people. I love the Italian culture, and I have nothing but great things to say about my time in Italy. I spent a little bit over, I want to say, a year there, probably more than that, and I was dating an Italian from the city of Milan, so we spent a bit of time in Milan. And I can't say enough good things about Italy, especially if you go to some of the smaller places or smaller cities. Get outside of like Rome, although I personally love Rome and Milan and Florence and Venice and all those places. They're famous for a reason. But Italy has so much more to offer. Obviously, great wine. And so that is one place I would highly, highly recommend. It's also extremely affordable, great value for your money, and I see even more Americans every year moving to Italy. And that's not to say none of these places don't have their own problems, whether that's culturally, politically, what may have you, but for the most part, most of that stuff won't actually affect your day-to-day life. But I should also point out that Estonia, Georgia, and Latvia are very close to this certain country by the name of Russia, who happen to have Putin right there, and so you need to have maybe a little bit more elevated alertness in some of those areas than you would need to have in other places like Albania. Then after Italy, we are going to go to Spain. Spain, another place I absolutely love. I lived in Spain, and depending on what day this video actually goes up, I will probably be back in Spain at the time of release of this video. But Spain, great food, great wine, good weather, friendly people, vibrant culture, tons of different lifestyles you can live in Spain. I mainly lived in the Andalusia region, so that's in the south of the country, closer to like Portugal. So you got like Marbella, you got Valencia, you got Malaga, you got Alicante, which is where I'm going to be here pretty soon, and where I used to live. And then in the northern part of the country, you got like San Sebastian, you got Bilbao, you got Madrid. Just so much to offer in Spain. Once again, great weather, low cost of living, great place to be. Then finally, where I currently have residency, is Portugal. So Portugal, obviously one of my favorite places in the entire world. Great weather, especially if you're in like the south of the country, in like the Algarve region. So generally I talk about like Albufeira, and I personally live in Lisbon, but Porto is great in the north of the country. There's some other places in the north of the country that I am forgetting. But in general, if you check out the Algarve region, it's probably going to be a bit more affordable than Porto and Lisbon. But Portugal has a lot to offer, great weather, a little bit slower pace of living for sure. Decent food, good wine, especially the sweet port wine. I absolutely love that stuff. Can't go wrong. So, I think this video got a little bit longer than I anticipated, and so we're gonna wrap it up here. But once again, I want to put a pretty little bow on this with the fact that all of these places are going to have a low cost of living. You're going to have a good quality of life. Some of them have better weather than others. Some places are cheaper or more affordable than others, but they're all going to be safe and have good health care, and you can get access to long-term visas. One thing I should caution you is that depending on the amount of money you make, some of these places, like Spain, are going to be a lot less tax efficient than other places like Estonia or maybe even Georgia. So that is something to be highly, highly aware of depending on your income level, your income bracket, and some other things that aren't the topic of this video. Like if you're interested in like capital gains taxes, or if you have a business or things like that. But just be aware of that before diving head into choosing one of these countries. Now, with all that said, we're going to wrap up the video. Thank you for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. And as always, peace, much love.